Today we are going to discuss a very important poem in the history of Indians writing in English. The poem is Night of the Scorpion by Nissim Ezekiel. The poem Night of the Scorpion has been taken from Nissim Ezekiel's volume of poems entitled The Exact Name, which was published in the year 1965. Before we proceed to study the details of the poem, let us discuss the poet first. Born in 1924, Nissim Ezekiel is a major poet of Indo-Anglian poetry, and by virtue of his unique style of writing, Nissim Ezekiel occupies a very important position in Indo-Anglian literature. He was the first Indian poet to express modern Indian sensibility in modern idiom. The poem Night of the Scorpion shows several of Nissim Ezekiel's qualities as a poet, and in this poem he appears in a very favorable light. It is undoubtedly an excellent poem, realistic, dramatic and lyrical, and has plenty of vivid imagery and possessive narrative interest as well. The simplicity of the language used and the colloquial words and phrases employed in the poem are some of the additional merits. The poem reads like a story, and it focuses on a single episode in the life of an Indian family. The speaker here narrates an incident, how his mother was stung by a scorpion one night when it was raining heavily, and what happens afterwards, the following of the biting of scorpion. The speaker mentioned in the poem may be the poet himself or some other person, real or imaginary. Even the incident itself may also be actual or imaginary, but it is made perfectly realistic and convincing incident. The poem begins simply but dramatically. Here the speaker informs us that he remembers a particular night when his mother was stung by a scorpion. The dramatic effect gradually increases with every line that follows. The coming of the neighbors in large numbers, the reactions of the neighbors to what has happened, their efforts to reduce the woman's pain, and the efforts of the author's father to do the same but by different means are some of the stages that follow this encounter. The young child is watching the flame which rises from his mother's stove. So these are the progression of the poem Night of the Scorpion. In the poem there is a dynamic setup where human interaction and wild side of nature are portrayed. The entire episode incident is observed and narrated by the speaker in first person. This is perhaps a child, a daughter, or maybe a son also. The names and ages of the young child are not revealed at any stage of the poem. The speaker throughout is soaking up the atmosphere, articulating and trying to make sense of rituals and rites, even the behavior and reaction of the people who gathered there. The peasants in the poem are portrayed and seen as being superstitious and old-fashioned, even illiterate, but they have a primitive social impulse to help the mother, bringing candles and lanterns and company, which shows a willingness to share the pain of their fellow beings. There is a twist at the end, which is welcomed by many readers and even disliked by a few. Whatever the opinion, There is no doubt that the poem has very fantastic imagery, and it is also remarkable for its powerful language. Overall, Night of the Scorpion is a remarkable poem, gripping because of its narrative interest, fascinating by virtue of its dramatic quality, and it's also very moving because it has a very painful, emotional, and yet an exhilarating close, a joyful close, a happy ending. As far as the structure of the poem is concerned, Night of the Scorpion is a free verse poem with 8 stanzas and a total of 47 lines. There is no set rhyme scheme, and the meter is mixed, which of course reflects the unusual subject matter and unfamiliar nature of the incident which is described in the poem. In order to understand the poem fully, let us read the text.
The poem begins simply but dramatically with the author informing us that he remembers the night when his mother was stung by a scorpion. In order to understand the text of the poem, let us first of all look at the overview of the poem. There is an incident which begins with the biting of a scorpion to a mother, and there is an increase in the dramatic effect with the coming of the neighbors in large numbers, and there is the reactions of the neighbors to what has happened, their efforts to decrease the woman's pain, the efforts of the author's father to do the same but by different means, and there is a child who observes the flame which rises from his mother's stove. So, this is overall the progression of the poem. Let us see the text itself. I remember the night my mother was stung by a scorpion. 10 hours of steady rain had driven him to crawl beneath a sack of rice. Parting with his poison flash of diabolic tail in the dark room, he risked the rain again. The poet says he remembers the night on which his mother was bitten by a scorpion. It had been raining continuously for 10 hours, and it was the rain which had forced the scorpion to creep into the house and take shelter beneath a sack of rice. Then, following it, with the rapidity of lightning, the scorpion had bitten the mother of the narrator in the dark room, and after having injected its devilish poison into his mother's body, and having thus got rid of his accumulated poison, the scorpion swiftly moved out of the house, though it was still raining. Of course, in moving out, the scorpion risked its life. Following this biting of the mother, there is a reaction. The peasants came like swarms of flies and buzzed the name of God 100 times to paralyze the evil one. With candles and with lanterns, throwing giant scorpion shadows on the mud baked walls, They searched for him. He was not found. They clicked their tongues. With every movement that the scorpion made, his poison moved in mother's blood, they said. The meaning is the peasants living in the neighborhood came to the house of the narrator in large numbers, in the same way as the multitudes of flies gather at a place which attracts them. The peasants utter the name of God many times in order to give the devilish sting of the scorpion ineffective and to bring some relief to the pain which the mother of the narrator was experiencing. The peasants brought along candles and lanterns with them in order to search for the scorpion and kill it. The light of the candles and the lanterns threw huge shadows on the walls of the house. These shadows seem to be enlarged reflections of the scorpion, and these shadows fell upon the walls, which were perfectly dry because of the sun's rays, which always fell upon them during the daytime, during the sunny days. But ultimately, the peasants could not find the scorpion, and in their disappointment, they produced with their tongues sounds indicative of their disappointments. They clicked their tongues, which was indicative of their disappointment. The peasant said that with every movement made by the scorpion, his poison would move in the blood of the speaker's mother. Thus, the pain of the mother will increase. More of the movement of the scorpion, more is the pain of the mother. They express their wish. May he still, may he sit still, they said. May the sins of your previous birth be burned away tonight, they said. May your suffering decrease the misfortunes of your next birth, they said. May the sum of all evil balance in the unreal world against the sum of good become diminished by your pain. The peasants, the neighborhood, who poured into the house of the narrator, expressed the wish that the scorpion should remain motionless. Then they also expressed their wish that the sins committed by this woman in her previous life should be burned away by the pain which she was suffering tonight. Next, they expressed their wish that her suffering should diminish the misfortunes which she was destined to suffer in her next life. Even they further expressed the wish that the woman's pain should lead to a lessening of the overall impact of evil as opposed to the aggregate of good in this world. Means all her good and all her evil should be balanced tonight, so her pain should not be carried forward to her next life. The world, in their view, was only an illusion, and not the reality. Following this, They went on to express the wish that the poison in the scorpion's sting should clean the woman's flesh of all desire, and that it should also rid her of all ambition. Let's read the text again. May the poison purify your flesh of desire and your spirit of ambition, they said. And they sat around on the floor with my mother in the center, the piece of understanding on each face. More candles, more lanterns, more neighbors, more insects, and the endless pain, endless rain. My mother twisted through and through, groaning on a mat. On a mat. The peasant continued with their expression of the wish that all the desires of this woman should end with the suffering she is experiencing tonight, and at the same time she should also get rid of all her ambitions, finding themselves helpless. All the peasants, all the neighborhoods were all sitting on the floor with the mother of the speaker seated on a mat in the center. The face of each of the peasants had an expression of serenity, calmness, peacefulness on it, and this calmness was indicative of each one's view that he understood the mystery of what had taken place. Means they had their own ways of justification what the woman was experiencing tonight. More candles and more lanterns were brought. More neighbors came to the house. More insects were praised without the scorpion being found anywhere. But the scorpion was not found anywhere. The rain seemed to have no end. My mother sat all the time groaning with pain. The mother, she twisted through and through, and she was suffering which was having no end to it. Twisting her body, she was because she was experiencing great amount of pain. Following this helplessness of the neighborhood, there is the reaction of the father. My father, skeptic, rationalist, trying every curse and blessing, powder, mixture, herb, and hybrid. He even poured a little paraffin upon the bitten toe and put a match to it. I watched the flame feeding on my mother. I watched the holy man perform his rites to tame the poison with an incantation. After 20 hours, it lost its sting. The father, who was who did not hold any orthodox religious beliefs and who was a believer in reason, believer in logic rather than in superstition, tried every course and he tried every blessing, means he applied all the methods, and he even applied some medicinal powder, some mixture of some materials, herbs, and several herbs mingled with each other. He even went to the extent of pouring a little paraffin upon the bitten toe of the mother and applied a burning matchstick to it in order to burn away the flesh where the scorpion had bitten the mother. The child narrator watched the flame burning the mother's flesh, and this flesh was rising. It was becoming bigger and bigger. He also watched a religious minded man performing certain rites to nullify the effect of the scorpion's poison and invoking the aid of some holy powers. And after all these application of various methods, after 20 hours, the scorpion sting lost its effect and the mother was relieved of her pain. At the end of all this suffering, the narrator says, "My mother only said, 'Thank God, the scorpion picked on me and spared my children.'" He says, "At the end, my mother simply said that she was thankful to God for the scorpion's choice of her for his sting and for his not biting any of her children." The ending line of the concluding lines of the poems are remarkable here. The last three lines of the poem bring the poem to a close which is unforgettable. These are unforgettable because these three lines express the bitten woman's own reaction to her experience of the agony of the sting. Means now, for the first time, she is giving reaction to the stinging. Here is in these last three lines, there is a typical Orthodox Indian mother who, forgetting her own pains, forgetting her own agony, thanks God for the scorpions having spared her children. In these lines, there is maternal love. Here we have the maternal tenderness, motherly affection. This is, of course, a most moving conclusion to the poem. The woman's pain and agony were certainly moving, but the close of the poem is much more deeply moving. So, this is all about the text of the poem Night of the Scorpion by Nissim Ezekiel. Thank you.